It's kind of like insurance too, Nick, right? If you think about, we're talking about that 2 year window preparing for an acquisition, you don't have enough time to get the hire wrong, right? You just
No.
don't. It's going to take 6 to 9 months to get an executive leader up to speed and up to be able to run the processes of a company. So then after that, you've got 12 to 15 months of them to actually execute and make an impact and make a difference before you look at a sale.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I'm your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. My guest today is the founder and managing partner of Pender & Howe, a fast-growing executive search firm across North America. He is a board member of Kestria, the world's largest executive search alliance. He is an avid golfer and traveler, a dad to a little girl and 2 Australian shepherds. Please welcome my guest today, Travis Hann. Travis, how you doing?
Well, Nick, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to our conversation today because it's a very relevant topic in the M&A space. We look at designing leadership teams and A players that buyers will pay for. So when they're looking to an exit, it becomes an asset, not a liability. But also, we were talking just offline too about M&A firms, and you're in the world that you work in, and how we hire those A players that are gonna stick and be around for a long time that we can invest in our space. And I think all of us are looking for ways in which to do that a little bit better. So we'll dive into a little bit of that here. But tell our listeners just about your firm, the alliance you're in, and just the business and the world that you guys work
in. Yeah, absolutely. So we are an executive search firm, Nick. Companies, investors, they call us when there needs to be a leadership hire at an organization, whether it be director, VP, C-suite, or board level. That's really the area we play in. Pender & Howe, my company, we operate right across North America, and we're 16 people with a generalist area of capabilities in different industries, from industrial manufacturing to life sciences, healthcare to technology and software, and a few others as well. And we're a part of Kestria. So Kestria is 41 firms in 41 different countries now. So we bring a really diverse, international, global kind of vision, I would say, to the boutique search world here. So this is what we do, and things are changing rapidly as it is, I'm sure, for a lot of different business owners and companies these days. And we are fortunate to get a pretty unique perspective on some of the changes that are taking place of what we see our clients doing, and frankly how hiring's changing. Right? I mean, people are a company's biggest asset. So happy to chat with you about that today.
Yeah. So when you look at executives, and when we're talking about the work that our listeners do, is typically working with business owners in the lower middle market, which we define as, 5 million to 150 million plus in revenue. What are the kind of clientele that you're working with when you're looking to help these companies? Is it that same space, bigger, smaller? I guess what is your kind of target client demographic look like?
Very similar, yeah. So mid market, I would say, probably 5 million, even upwards to 100 million. Is kind of the sweet space of where we are most active in, I would describe. And naturally that tends to be around, call it the 50 employee mark to 2,000 employee mark, right? I think it really depends on where the headquarters is and where we're focused at the time, but that's very much the sweet spot for us.
And what is the objective? What are you and your firm looking to do and accomplish with working with your clients?
Yeah, I think it's, really trying to find those amazing leaders that can move the needle for an organization who are not necessarily looking for a job, right? I think that is ultimately where we come in to really support organizations is if a company is looking for a new CFO, the reality is a lot of the times it's confidential, which is why we're called in as consultants. But more often than not, the person we place is not looking for a job, right? So I'm sure we'll dive into AI and technology and how that's influencing our world, all of our worlds. And the matter of the fact is, while it makes some of the job easier, it also makes some of the job harder, right? Because so much is accessible now to everyone. And that's, kind of a moving target that we're dealing with. But we're there to find people who are not looking, that can come in and really help an organization get to the next level.
Yeah, are you guys looking at, and I think the topic we want to talk about today too really is a company who maybe is looking to sell soon, or maybe in the, we'll say the next 5 years. So when you're working with the business owner that is looking to sell in, 1 to 5 years, we'll call it, um, how do you assess whether their current leadership team is sale ready or not? And what are some red flags that you guys maybe see when you're doing that assessment that's like, yeah, maybe we don't have the right team in place?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different things that make an impact on this, right? I think the first question business owners or investors or M&A advisors need to ask is, can that business run without the founder, right? If the answer is no, red flags, right? And if you're the business owner listening to this podcast and the answer is no, it's probably time to kind of reflect and see who you have around you and how you can make your business run without you. I think that's a pretty critical question to ask pretty soon. Number two is, and this is a bit more industry related, but if you're a services based business and majority or all of your revenue is tied to one person or one or two rainmakers, that's also, a fairly big red flag, right? You want to make sure that your revenue is predictable. If you look at over the last 5 years, is there any sort of consistency or predictableness to where that revenue comes from, right? And the sooner you start trying to organize that so it becomes a little bit predictable, the more valuable your services business will be and the more attractive it will be to an investor. So I think those two things are pretty important. The third is, do you have anyone on your leadership team who can get your business to where that investor wants it to be, right? So if you're sitting at a $10 million business today and no one on your leadership team has ever seen a $50 million business, well, you might want to start to hire people who have been to where you're trying to go or where you think the new investors will want to take the business, because it's just going to make it a little bit more of a plug and play for whoever's looking to make that acquisition.
So you mentioned, the business owner, if they're very hands-on or not, and if the business is reliant solely on them. And obviously, yeah, like you said, we want to make sure that, the business owner can leave for a month and come back and everything's still running smoothly. So if the owner is very hands-on, um, what do you recommend they start in terms of upgrading or adding leadership bench before a transaction? Like, where is that? Like, what's that first step that you see that, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, you are the business. Like, you want to sell, we need to find you a team. Like, where do you start?
Yeah. I think there's two really critical roles in a org chart for a founder to look at when they're trying to think about an acquisition. Number one is finance. Pretty self-explanatory, but those books need to be squeaky clean when you're preparing for an acquisition, right? You need to have forecasts tight, budgets tight, P&Ls tight. And you really want to get that person in the seat, I would say, at minimum kind of 2 years before any sort of real acquisition takes place, so they can kind of see two cycles and have a bit of a cleanup period if it's required. Number two is operations, right? And operations can mean a whole lot of different things to different businesses. But you want to make sure that frameworks are created, SOPs are created, that people know where to go to for what, so you can actually make a business scalable. If the founder or the business owner has 80% of all the information in their head for an organization, they are a liability, right? I mean, if that business owner, something happens to them and they're unable to make it to work on Monday morning, that business has just kind of lost 80% of its value because no one can really work with what is left behind, right? So I think those are the two roles that are critical. And like I said, 2 years in advance to an acquisition, you want to make sure you have the right people in place with the right incentives there so that they can kind of get that business prepared for investors to look at.
Yeah. So at least 2 years is your preferred amount of time to be able to make a meaningful impact.
Yeah, I mean, first year is kind of a assess and probably clean up and organize, right? And then you want to see a cycle of a year where everything is coming together. And because, I mean, if you have operations that need to be cleaned up, sometimes there's bottlenecks in there that can also make that profitability start to soar in that second year once things are working together. So I think 2 years is a good number. Longer, the better, I think, in terms of 3 to 5 years. 2 years is probably the sweet spot.
Do you have an example maybe in your experience where bringing on a key executive or two has really meaningfully increased the value or an attractiveness of the company, where maybe now they can think about selling?
Yeah, there's probably two that come to mind. One is a services-based business that I'm quite familiar with, where the founding members, I would say, were very sales savvy, right? Very relationship driven, had the ability to scale, bring big client relationships in, and execute that work. and they were sitting at around a $5 million business at the time. The reality is there was a huge bottleneck on operations to allow the business to further scale, right? To add more people to the team, to grow the revenue beyond what the founding members could do. And they ended up bringing in a head of operations, and that person took about, a good 18 months to streamline frameworks and SOPs and hiring procedures, et cetera, and removed the founder from what they thought was good operations. And, call it, in kind of a 5 to 7 year period, that business has went from $5 million to $35 million. And the reality is when you get everything streamlined and people know where to go and there's systems in place, you can repeat scalability tasks, right? And I think that's a pure example of an operations person. The second is we were called in to do a founder transition for a CEO search ultimately, but to replace a founder for an industrial business. And they were in the mobility space. And ultimately, founders are very good visionaries oftentimes, right? But that doesn't mean they're the best business people to lead through transformation or scale a business from $10 to $50 million, because frankly, a lot of them have never done it before. And the founder that we were replacing had a little bit of analysis paralysis, where they wanted to perfect the R&D and the product so much that there was actually no real feedback from the market because they weren't putting products in consumer hands. And we ultimately wanted to mature up that organization and find a CEO who's, at a business doing very well, that had the volume that they needed. And we ultimately found a CEO, brought him in, and his main goal was to get, products in consumers' hands, right? Then let the real-time feedback come in. We'll assess with R&D, but, any product person listening on this call knows it's never perfect, right? It's always kind of a moving target. And, within 3 years, that business had done exactly that, but then did the successful exit and they sold off the business. So I think sometimes founders also need to kind of look at themselves in the mirror and ask themselves, are they the right person for the company for where they want it to be? But those are two prime examples of, real stories that have kind of allowed businesses to thrive by putting the right people in the right seat.
We've run in a situation where, business owner has to sell. They don't have the team in place. Maybe they're actually in the sale, the exit process with an M&A advisor. That, maybe it's a conversation with the business owner and the advisor, and they did evaluation, and now they feel like the leadership team is not there. It's maybe hurting the value, but the business owner still wants to continue to move forward. Have you ever worked in a situation where you're kind of running parallel with the sale and bringing on the executive team at the same time?
Yeah, it's more common than you would think. A lot of the time in the private equity space, where an acquisition will actually be dependent on whether or not they can find a CEO to go along with the acquisition. So that's quite common, to be frank, and that just shows you, how much the leadership team is important for the health of the business, right? Our phone often rings with, hey, we might have a deal, we might not have a deal, but it really depends on whether or not we can pair up a CEO with this acquisition. So it's a common thing.
And do you handle that any differently than, your 2-year runway?
Yeah, because I think time is a little bit tighter, right? And, from our point of view, it's a fun search, but it's also a bit of a complicated search, right? Because you're dealing with candidates who are fully aware that they're putting energy and resources into an opportunity that may not actually come to fruition, right? So, it's a bit of a higher speed, I would say. But the 2-year transition is a little bit more of a different, they're able to kind of see the entire deck of cards, right? Versus representing something super confidentially where very limited information is disclosed.
What happens, in this space, whether it's a leadership team or just, employees in general, but let's talk about the leadership team here. What separates A-player leaders, from, average hires? What are the characteristics that really, hey, this is the person? We know that because they got X, Y, and Z traits.
Yeah. I think A players look different for mid-market companies of what we're talking about and what our realities are, Nick, to global conglomerates, right? And I think that's normal. A players, to me, on what we've kind of taken in from seeing a lot of different processes and talents come and go, is there's kind of two things that really stand out. It's scrappiness and being a self-starter, right? And then the question becomes, well, how do you identify that in an interview process? What does that actually mean? My way of assessing that and what I like to ask is, to the scrappiness, ask the question, have you ever created something, whether it be a process, a system, something for your organization, for your M&A firm, because it didn't exist and you knew it would help you kind of do better work, right? And if the person across the other side of the interview table is unable to give you any sort of example of something that they've created, they may not really be scrappy in terms of being able to kind of be entrepreneurial of what your firm or your organization needs. Um, Self-starter, I have a very simple way of kind of tracking this in an interview process on my end. It's very easy to let emotions take over of an interview process, right? You interview someone, you love them, you're driving with them, that you have a lot of similarities and commonalities, and that can take over from their actual competencies and capabilities, which is a bit of a dangerous place to be in, right? And I think we all fall in that trap in some points in our career, where when an interview is done, don't do a follow-up with the candidate. Just leave it, right? If they're really eager about the opportunity, they're going to come and follow up with you, hopefully within 24 hours of that interview. And I actually know a really well-established business leader in New York City, and his philosophy is he does the same thing. He does not follow up after an interview, but even when the candidate follows up with them once, he won't respond to that email. He'll wait one more time. And he feels that the real self-starters are the ones that come back again 24 hours, making sure they got that email. And I think there's a lot of magic in that, right? It's very simple, but I think those are the type of people you want in deal making, whether it be M&A, whether it be executive search, sales, and it's something that I would challenge, the listeners to kind of give a try to, right? I think some good magic can be found in that.
That's an interesting perspective. I like that because, yeah, in the hiring world, it's like, do I follow up? Do I not? But to just take the initiative, and if you want it, go get it. Essentially,
That's it.
What are some strategies, business owners can use, or we can maybe consult our business owner clients on to attract top tier, executive talent, especially maybe if they don't have a big brand or the compensation package might be, less than ideal, or, what are some things that they could do when we identify, other than working with you guys, obviously, but if we're advising a client, on, what are some strategies that we can use to help them find those A players?
Yeah, there's different ways to answer this, right? There's the how do you attract the talent, where there's so much noise in the market these days. It can be difficult to get in front of the right people, right? But I think that's a whole other conversation. So if I answer it from the point you're in front of the talent, how do you actually lock them in to join the team? But then how do you lock them in for the next 5 years, right? And I think what's really important is gone are the days where a company is selling their dream on equity entirely, right? I think we're in a position where there's too much competition and inflation's through the roof, interest rates are high, et cetera. The younger generation, they need fixed income, right? And I think that's really important to make sure that you're offering some sort of competitive wage on the fixed side. But long-term incentive plans, I think there's a lot of magic in that, right? You got short-term incentive plans, bonus annually, year to year. But on a long-term incentive plan, how do you tie in your top performers for 3 to 5 years? And I think if you're able to put a really appealing program together, you're able to lock great talent in. And that's not something that every organization offers, right? So I think if you're able to craft something that's appealing, that's going to get them over the line of saying, hey, I want to be somewhere for the next 5 years. The reality is most people have the intention of joining a company for 5 years at minimum, right? That doesn't always happen, but I think if they're able to think that way, they're going to outplay the people or the organizations that may be a little bit more transactional in their attrition, right? Growth from a personal standpoint and then a company standpoint too, right? What can you offer them if they're earlier in their career, they're 7 to 10 years in, what can you do to fast track them to become a VP or a GM or a C-suite leader, right? Anything you're able to do to sell that dream a little bit in real context is going to do the organization very well. And then on the flip side, you also want to make sure that the company is doing things that's making the company appealing, right? Like how does the culture define? What are you doing that makes those individuals actually want to go to work every day, hustle hard, and stick around?
So that's hiring new talent. What about, in an exit process where you're looking at retaining your leadership team, your key employees? Because, once they catch wind of a sale, immediate thought is, am I going to lose my job? Do I want to stay? Like, what does this mean? Like a whole bunch of unknown and uncertainty. what are some, maybe it's it's a package of, or how do you get them to stay and
Yeah.
understand the vision with the new owner inevitably coming in?
Yeah. There's, I guess, different life cycles of the acquisition, right? There's founders that are sitting in the seat right now that know in the next 10 years they want to do a liquidity event. And then there's some who perhaps know it's a bit of a shorter time frame, right? And there's probably different answers for both of those, Nick. I think there's magic in sharing the pie. That's my take. I know there's different kind of perspectives on that. But in order to have that stickiness of having your top performers stick around during the acquisition, which is pretty critical, there's nothing wrong with a really strong ESOP program, right? That could be the LTI that I talked about previously for maybe the more younger leaders coming up to the organization. But if you kind of reflect and think, who are my top 3 to 5 performers of this business that I need to help go through this liquidity event, and then maybe an earnout period for myself for 1 to 2 years. Maybe it is the ESOP program, right? And maybe it is triggered at different phases of that liquidity cycle so that they are getting their piece of the pie. And it's kind of a one-win team versus if the owner is 100% owner, that's a bit of pressure on their shoulders to kind of go through with that liquidity event, right?
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level. Because the last thing you want is to be close to the finish line and then a key leader leaves because maybe they didn't know or whatnot. In your experience, when you look at a sale of a business, and you're talking to the business owner or you're talking to the advisor who's is advising the business owner, and you need to keep a leadership team in place, but there's obviously a whole bit of uncertainty and uneasiness about confidentiality. Is this actually selling? Like, when do you recommend the business owner bring in the leadership team into the equation, help let them know about, hey, I'm going to sell, we're this far on the process. Let's say they haven't before the sale, like we're in due diligence or we're in the process, we're accepting IOIs, whatever. When do you recommend that the business owner has that conversation? Because I know in the back of their mind, they're thinking, I don't want to lose this person. I want them to stay because it's value to the company. Like, when do you recommend that conversation happen?
I'm a fan of earlier the better, Nick, right? I think catching people at a left field at the 11th hour is quite dangerous for a deal. People love transparent communication in this day and age. And I think the earlier you can bring them into the scenario, respecting the confidentiality and ideally thinking about what's in it for them, right? I think any business owner, M&A advisor that's working with business owners, I think that's the conversation to have is, again, your top 5 to 10 performers, what is in it for them? Just because a business sells doesn't mean life is over at the organization. In fact, it could mean the complete opposite, where, hey, this could be the best thing that's ever happened for your career. Let me explain why. And then let me explain why I want to tie you into this a little bit from a financial standpoint to make sure you can get to that finish line. But then what do the next 3 to 5 years look like with new ownership, right? And every conversation is probably different. In a mid-sized company that we're kind of talking about today, it's probably not a town hall where everyone figures it out in the cafeteria at the same time. It's probably more one-on-ones with your top performers to craft a plan that's appropriate for them and get their feedback and get their reaction and work with them to make sure it's in their best interest. So that would be my recommendation. And I think that's pretty standard for some great transactions that have happened.
Yeah, good advice. Talking about a specific industry, the M&A industry, we're looking at hiring, A-player advisors, the people leading the deal, executing the deal, closing on the deal. Any advice? We talked a little bit offline, and And, I think your industry is kind of similar where, how do we find A player advisors? How do we retain them, for the long haul, and, which will obviously, better the operation of the business, but also the value of the business. And you look at, the rainmakers being the firm owners, a lot of times they're the one bringing in a lot of the business development. Then they ask the question, do I have a firm to actually transfer, or am I just doing this just to do it? And then when I leave, it'll just kind of, whatever. I think we want to practice what we preach. And so any recommendations for our listeners on, how to go about hiring and finding and retaining that A player who could be a really good, transaction advisor?
Yeah. Um, my immediate reaction is use a search firm, but I don't want this to be a sales pitch. And the reason I think there is so much value in having, call it an agent. I mean, I'm sure it's the same argument M&A advisors make, right? It's like trying to sell your own house versus bringing in an expert. And
Right.
the reality is the best people, Nick, have their head down at their job and they're killing it, right? And it's how do you get in front of that person to entice them for the company that I'm representing and the role that we have. And um, that's the magic in using a consultant, right? Whether you're using your internal team or you're using a consultant externally, take it from either end of the table. But you need to be proactive in reaching out to that talent and not waiting for it to come in, because the reality is I've been at this for over a decade. I've done 30 different leadership assignments a year, and I could probably count on one hand the amount of people that we've helped recruit who have came to us, right? It's always going out to find them. So I think that's important, and making sure that you have crystal clear communication on what your company does, what part of the company they're going to fit into is super critical, and what that job is, right? I think oftentimes companies go to the market looking for somebody to fit a role, and when it actually comes down time to interview, they start to realize that role looks a lot different than what they first imagined, right? So get crystal clear on what that role is, what their task is within the business, so that you can articulate it crystal clear and consistent, because really great A players will pick up on inconsistencies and get scared off, right? So I think those are pretty important pieces. In terms of the incentivizing and locking really top performers in, there is so much magic in a strong incentive plan, right? A good incentive plan should pay for itself, and top performers should be able to have an uncapped ability to make as much income as they want if we're talking about a deal making industry, sales, et cetera. And hopefully business owners aren't afraid to share that pie, because that is what people want, quite honestly, right? They want a clear understanding of what the incentive plan is. I always say the incentive plans that are hard to articulate and communicate are the ones that are hard to pay out. The ones that are simple to articulate and simple to understand are the ones that often pay out, right? So I think keeping it stupid simple has some benefits to it as well.
Yeah. Well, and two, I mean, you're looking at, when you're looking to hire someone who's going to be around for a while, like you said, they're typically not the person who's looking for a job. So, to kind of hit on where you're referencing there, hiring a search firm, you guys are really good at finding those people when they don't need a job, and those are the people that you probably want. And if you identify, this is the DNA of who I want to hire, um, could go out and help me find, a couple of quality candidates. I think not only are you saving me time, but, if you save time, money, resources to hire right now, I think it's, the right person now, instead of going through a couple of, I missed on that one, I missed on this one. Now you're just back to square one and wasted a lot of money and time on it. I think there is value in working with someone like your team to be able to find those people, that are the A players, because now we're in alignment of, hey, this is what I want. You guys have the resources to go and find those people. Like, it seems pretty logical.
Well, it's kind of like insurance too, Nick, right? I mean, if you think about, we're talking about that 2 year window preparing for an acquisition, you don't have enough time to get the hire wrong, right? You just
No,
don't.
you don't.
It's going to take 6 to 9 months to get an executive leader up to speed and up to be able to run the processes of a company. So then after that, you've got 12 to 15 months of them to actually execute and make an impact and to make a difference before you look at a sale, right? So I kind of consider it, for this conversation and purpose specifically, it's kind of like hiring insurance, right? And where if you need to hire a CFO, you literally cannot afford to hire the wrong CFO. You don't have enough time. So it's kind of an investment to make sure that you're getting the best people, and the entire market's being looked at, no stone unturned. And it gives you the confidence to make that big offer at the end of the day because you know that you did the right due diligence on the search.
Right. Absolutely. We say it to our clients all the time, like you hit on before, like Mrs. Business Owner, you've never sold your business before. We've sold hundreds, like let us sell it for you. It's kind of the same philosophy where you guys have helped hundreds of companies hire key people. So tap into that for sure.
Yeah, very similar.
And but and as you're looking for people, you guys do a great job. You got all the resources. What are you seeing with AI coming into the recruiting, industry, especially those key executives? How are you guys using AI to help with this whole process?
Yeah, AI is the buzz around town this year, right? And last year, and the reality is, Nick, it's helping us organize processes and how we represent processes, or maybe a little bit on how we assess talent. It's helping us identify talent quicker. But you and I were chatting offline earlier, and the reality is, some may look at it and say, I don't need a recruiter anymore. I can go and do AI sourcing and come up with the names, et cetera. That's not why clients pay us, right? The reality is it's actually harder now from our perspective to get in front of that great talent because there is so much noise, because people are so accessible, where that actually makes our job a little bit harder, right? Because we have to get even better now at getting in front of those really high performing leaders, because 15 people are going after them because they all can find and access them. So I think that has made our craft even a little bit more important in terms of how we do it. So the tools are varying, right? I mean, there's amazing tools now where we can truly, pack on an AI note taker to a client call, and it can listen to exactly what you're telling me you need in your next CFO. It summarizes those notes perfectly for me. It brings it over to our CRM, and then it actually even goes to our sourcing tool and comes up with the first 10 names to see if we're on pace, right? So if you were to tell me that 5-10 years ago when we were doing things more manually and old school, I would have thought that is completely bonkers. But the reality is, it's helped us minimize mistakes, and it's helped us be more sophisticated and polished to clients, Nick. But the way that we still assess leaders, the way that we get in person with them, because I think that is really how you can tell and differentiate a player from a not an A player, that is all still very much the same, right? The human connection there is where the magic's at. And there's certain things in an organization that I feel should be automated and can be automated. But there's also certain things that you just cannot remove the human touch from as a business owner, because it can be pretty dangerous if you take out the human element of some job tasks in a company and in a culture, right?
Right.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday morning, and hearing the unfortunate story about how many of the Amazon employees just learned about losing their jobs, which was a text message. And I think those are certain things where it does not sit well for the company DNA and the culture, and everyone that works at that company, they lose a little bit of confidence in their job, because if they treat 1,000 people like that on a layoff, it can have a really negative kind of connotation on the culture internally, right? So you want to make sure the human element still implemented pretty strongly in certain areas of that business.
Right. Yeah, that would be, just thinking about that, that would be weird to get an AI generated text. Yeah, sorry you lost your job. That would
Right.
feel really disingenuous and like, almost, yeah, and I get the efficiencies behind it, but like I'd have a lot of questions. Like, is this real? Is this not? Like, what's going on? So yeah, AI,
Yeah.
to your point, AI is good in some ways, but shouldn't necessarily be needed in the more the people, facing type of decisions or processes. What and anything else with AI that you're seeing, or what does the future hold? With AI, you guys excited about anything that's coming, up in the near future that'll really help you guys out and do your jobs even better?
Yeah. I think the way that operations runs via AI is really interesting as a business owner, and something that hopefully any business owners that are listening to are looking at for their own operations, because I think it can increase the value of a business in terms of having your SOPs figured out and AI agents as a part of your org chart a little bit, right? Not to replace everyone on the team, but just to have streamlined ways of doing things consistently for boring administrative tasks, quite honestly, right? It minimizes areas of mistakes, and it maximizes speed to training new employees. And I think if you have a good framework built into your tech stack as a business, it makes it more valuable, right? Because you can bring new team members in and train them up really quickly, and get that business running without that leadership team that's been there for 10, 15 years because it's all really documented and trained from an AI standpoint. So that's what we're excited about, purely just to allow us to move a little bit quicker, Nick, and do more great work without being bogged down from administrative duties, which I think a lot of business owners are sharing that excitement right now.
Amazing. And one last question, Travis, has been great. For advisors or business owners listening, what are a couple of steps they can take in the next 90 days or so to upgrade their leadership team, talent strategy, or even assess their future to put themselves in a position, to be better whenever that time to sell is happening? Because, sometimes, a lot of times it happens too late. So, as they're thinking about this, whether they're selling or not, what are some things that they can do or think about or assess that really puts their leadership team in a good position?
Get people together for dinners, for lunches, for, team breakouts or team training. Nick, I know that sounds super simple, but the reality is, with all the AI talk and buzz and the amount of attention that's going into it, which I think is important and I think it's smart, you don't want to neglect your biggest asset during that phase, which is your people, right? People thrive on people. They love being around each other. They love sharing a meal, sharing a drink together, and doing events together. And that is something that AI will never replace, right? So if you can prioritize that and make an initiative to get everyone in one room, I think that does any sort of company and valuation well, even though it might be hard to quantify. And then the second piece is sit back and look at your org chart, look at your results. Who are your top 3 performers? Do you have an incentive plan built around them to have them stick around for the next 3 to 5 years? If the answer is no, do it, because that is what will attract your next group of A players. And you want to make sure that you have a good core group around you that lets you sleep a little bit better at night and make sure that your business is taken care of.
Great advice. Great advice. Where can our listeners find more about you guys if they're interested in enlisting your services to help and with their clients or even their own firms? Where can they reach you?
Definitely. We all live on LinkedIn. That's our platform of choice. So Travis Hann on LinkedIn, happy to connect with any of the listeners. And our company firm website is www.penderhowe.com.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure to check out their website. A lot of great resources and tools, and maybe someone you can work with when looking to help your clients out with their executive team, especially when they're looking to sell. So definitely check it out. I think you'll find some great information and maybe a connection there to help with that process. Again, everybody, thanks for listening and tuning in every week to the M&A Mastermind podcast. Please do Travis and myself a favor. Like, share, comment this episode, pass on anybody you think might find value in this episode. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go to all the places, and tune in every week for a new episode every Thursday morning. And appreciate you all listening in every week. Take care, everybody.